watching Public Eye, brought to you by the New Vision Movement. And now, here's your host, Dr. Frank McField.
Good evening and welcome to Public Eye Live from the CITN studios. We were on TV last night as well doing a political meeting, and we're on Public Eye because Public Eye is part of our regular broadcast. We've been doing Public Eye since 1997, and we do Public Eye now the first Thursday and the last Wednesday in every month. So although the election campaign is out there and it's very heated and things are going on, we're still continuing to do our Public Eye show because we believe that Public Eye has played a great role in informing people, not just about political issues, also about family issues, social issues, spiritual issues, educational issues, as many issues as we could get people to come on Public Eye to talk about, we were willing to discuss with you. So our trying to bombard the public with all this information is not something that has started simply because we are electioneering. We have been doing this continuously over the years in order to have a much better informed public. And so I think that there is something to be said. Beulah, my sister, also was a co-host of Public Eye, or is a co-host of Public Eye, and she's here with me this evening to not just be a co-host, but also to be one of the candidates that is being interviewed, one of the candidates that are running with the United Democratic Party in the District of Georgetown, and we call ourselves the Force of Four. I also have Mr. Lloyd Sampson, who's an attorney at law and who decided to be with the United Democratic Party, Force of Four, in the District of Georgetown. And we are sorry to say that bad flus and viruses are going around, and therefore we've lost to Mr. John Henry Ebanks this evening, who was not feeling well already last night, but by today he really felt that it would be impossible for him to attend this very, very, very important program, because we have decided to make the program for 2 hours, and it's not very easy to sit here and talk for 2 hours. Is maybe a little different if you're on a political platform and you have an audience, but when you're sitting here and talking basically to the camera and to the unseen audiences, it's something that you need to have quite a bit of skill to pull off. It would have been much nicer if we had 4 people, but we will try with our 3 persons here to make this not only a friendly but also an entertaining and enlightening 2 hours about the politics and about the dynamics of politics and about the institutions of politics and about some of the issues of politics. Because I think that sometimes in this country we begin to talk about Caymanian politics as if Caymanian politics is somehow separated from politics in the world. We are influenced in terms of our political behavior here in the Cayman Islands by what has happened and what continues to happen in other parts of the world, and therefore it's very important for us to have the possibility to have a comparative type of situation whereby we can compare ourselves and our political institutions to those in other countries. One of the interesting points I have found, and I will probably begin by asking Lloyd a question, because Lloyd, you studied law, and did that mean that you also studied political science? Because at one particular time, at least in the United States of America, political science was a prerequisite for law.
Yes, I can only lay claim to one course in my first year of University of the West Indies. It was taught by Professor Monroe, one of the leading luminaries in Jamaican politics. He has a very interesting history, and the course was quite stimulating, I must confess. It was indeed.
And well, I actually was going to study law, so I actually started to do what they call pre-law, which was political science and philosophy. That was a requirement in the United States at that particular time. And I did a lot of the philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, Aquinas, and people like that. And the general idea was for us to begin to understand the evolution of our political institutions.
Indeed.
How it came that in Western society and in Western culture we have embraced the concept of democracies. But Beulah, you must have had a little go at political science at some point.
I did, because when I decided to go to college, I thought I'd do law as well. And so I took the pre-law classes at Miami-Dade. And so in my social science class, we studied a lot about human nature and the development of humanity in its ways, and society and families and social consciousness, and also during the humanity classes, the arts and how they all develop. It was very interesting. I learned a lot.
I must say, Dr. Macfield, as well, the study of law, since both you and Ms. Beulah has touched on it, it's interesting in itself, because it not only helps one to develop an analytical mind, an ability, and I suppose a specific training to wade through, I suppose, some of the waffle and get to the issue of a matter and apply to those facts or issues the relevant principles. But it also tends to allow one to fully appreciate the interrelation between, I suppose, the different agencies that hold sway over a community or a society. And in that sense, it's related to politics, in that one will appreciate properly the need for separation of powers and the different roles the legislature, as distinct from the judiciary, and the executive have to play. So that's, in a way, a means whereby you get an insight.
But people must then understand that the reason why you have certain institutions is because there has been a history behind those institutions, and therefore the man has developed to the type of character that he or she is today. And the institutions which we have and which we embrace, it's something that did not come about just so. It has taken hundreds of years for them to, thousands of years for them to evolve in the form in which they are today. So we are benefiting from our past and the past of the civilizations that we are part of, and how we have been able to separate and how we've been able to understand the need for separation is also the result of some of our experiences that have not always been kind.
Indeed.
Because there have been some very, very, very rough periods in terms of the development of the concept of democracy, one man, one vote. And if you remember the whole concept of the absolute monarch and the evolution of the parliament, the British parliament in particular. I mean, the French was a little bit more traumatic, but the British parliament, the evolution of the Westminster system is very, very, very important in how the people begin to share in the decision-making process or processes with the aristocracy, the people who own the land. And the land was the means of producing.
Right.
If you didn't have land, then you have nothing.
Yes. I believe, unless Beulah wanted to jump in, however, you mentioned one man, one vote. I was just a few days ago browsing through the constitution that was proposed by the commissioners who recently conducted a review and other related matters. And I think, as well, I believe Mr. Bush now has an advisor that is down, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in these matters to see if you could catch him at one of the forums. I think it would be instructive. But at the basis of it, and I think one thing we must strive for, no matter what form ultimately our new constitution takes, that the concept of one man, one vote is something that we must strive very diligently to achieve in the Cayman Islands. It is at the root, the very root of democracy. I'm sure you will appreciate, and it's somewhat contrary to those principles to have our brothers and sisters living in East End and facing all the challenges that we face as Georgetowners, but yet at the end of the day, there is that disparity in the voting power.
But I wouldn't overemphasize that particular principle, because the principle of one man, one vote was not born really in constituencies in that sense. Not to mean that.
Right.
Not to mean, it means I have one vote just like you have one vote. Yes. We all are equal in voting, but it doesn't mean that the East End and West Bay and situation, which I think a lot of people here have touted that, but that is not, and this is the reason why I think it's important that people understand history and the historical development of the principles that will influence the formation of their constitutions and the democratic principles which they take up, because they were not the breeders of these principles. These principles were born and nurtured by societies that have sacrificed much to maintain them and to defend them. And you know, that's one of the reasons why when we start talking about a constitution, I think, and maybe I'm jumping off and saying too much, but when we're talking about a constitution, we must be talking about something that goes beyond copying.
Indeed.
It must be something that is essential to our very being and our very soul. We must plant in a political document and in our political behavior something that goes beyond just the material.
Ultimately, that document that carries us, I suppose, into the realm of nationhood must, as you say, go much further than principles we have copied and what have you. These principles can be and should be, I believe, given credence to the history that we've discussed, guiding principles and a blueprint for where we want to go. But I think it is obviously something that we must take in stages, and at this stage, giving the pressing need that we have, I believe, to at least evolve beyond the 1972 Constitution and the, I suppose, extended say or input that might or might not give us in the affairs of the country one way or the other. Dictates that some step forward at least.
But what I want to also point out, illuminate, is the way in which the Honorable McKeever Bush has gone about dealing with the constitutional issue already reflects the political play, the political realities. When we were given by the United Kingdom the possibility to evaluate our Constitution, and when a constitutional commission was called, Mr. Benson Ebanks, I think, was one of the members of the Constitutional Commission. What is happening here is they're saying, look, you do an evaluation of the constitutional document as purely a legal document, or as just something that will guide, but what is in there about you and what you feel and what people have tested and what people desire from the point of view of their sovereignty and their autonomy is not going to be called into question by people who are very, 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 let's say, technical about designing these things. So when it is stopped, and when you get the political will of the people reflecting a little bit more in the Constitution, what is it that we desire in the form of leadership? What kind of leadership? Just like a chief minister, leader of government business, or a premier, or what kind of leader? What kind of formations do you want to have in terms of making decisions? Now, those are questions that really should go beyond technical issues, because otherwise you're not interested in them.
I think that one of the things that we need to look at is the social anthropology of the development of humanity in itself, and culture and society. And for instance, you know, we've sat and we've discussed it, but what we need to look at is that we need to have some type of identity in our Constitution, not simply a document that is sent to us and say, okay, look at these are the type of modifications that you can make to this Constitution, but rather say, okay, let's go back and let's be able to draw up a Constitution that reflects who we are as a people, taking into account all of our heritage, our Christian heritage, our seafaring heritage, the entire thing, and then bringing forth a document that reflects who we are. The one man, one vote concept is not a bad concept, but is it truly our concept? I think that's what we need to look at.
Are we passionate about it? How passionate are we about it? Because all the people that have a constitution is that thing which governs you. It's the covenant. It's the sharing of the blood. It's the covenant. And most people have gotten it through some kind of turmoil. Nobody has been handed a constitution.
Yes. I'd like to think we're far removed, hopefully. The way things have been going recently, one can't, necessarily
Well, I mean,
say.
maybe that's the reason why a constitution is not as important to our people as it has been to other people, is because we are not involved in fomenting the Constitution, because the Constitution has to be more than legal jargon. It must reflect the identity of the people, the aspiration of the people.
And when you think about yourself as a people, and I think that's something that is a new reality to Caymanian, as thinking of ourselves as a people, not as a segment of some other people distant though it be. But as a people ourselves, then how are we going to be identified to the world? For instance, when I look at the American Constitution, or when I took a look at the Russian Constitution, it told you the identity of those particular peoples. It told you their ideology, their beliefs, political, social, and otherwise. Does our Constitution reflect who we are as a people?
Yes. I think, again, I approach it from a slightly different angle, and that's why I've enjoyed our last few weeks together, because we can always agree to disagree on various issues. And I think I understand, or I do understand, what at the end of the day we need to achieve is something that is reflective of who we are as a people. But I don't think that I could stress, from my point of view, enough the need to have at least, because a constitution, other than reflecting the culture of the people, is a document whereby certain procedural and other attendant norms are addressed and laid out for all to see. And there's much to be said for a degree of advancement along those lines, so that a person's role is spelled out, certain attendant human rights and other bills of rights are spelled out, so that one can have a clearer definition, I think, of an ordered society and the order that we intend to put to a society. And I think that has to be a prerequisite and a part of the process, and perhaps the first step that we take. Get used to the various institutions and procedural matters that are attendant on modern governance.
Yeah, but we are a development, an evolution of a society that has already existed, as I'm saying. So not all these things are strange to us. So we don't have to go back and make the same primitive formations and sacrifices. We have benefited from those, but what we're saying is that you must understand those in understanding a constitution, even our constitution, which is an appendix of a larger constitution. I mean, the British have had no written constitution.
Well, they don't have one.
They don't
have one,
which is quite ironic.
Well,
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And they are having more and more problems in not having a written constitution, simply because of their relationships with other nations that have come after them and have decided that they need written constitutions in order for people to know exactly what.
Historically, it has been the path that I suppose all Commonwealth nations, but definitely here in the West Indies and elsewhere, have followed. And I suppose the lawyer in me is attracted to the written document, and it clearly defines things and lets one know in no uncertain terms. But the dynamics that happen within that is something that can't be written, and you know, perhaps shouldn't be written. Those are cultural norms that are peculiar to us.
But just you know, sitting here, the three of us, who are definite running mates and have a common ideology and dream. And here we are discussing the Constitution and looking at it from three different perspectives.
Indeed.
So a constitution is not something that you can readily throw together.
No, indeed.
You know, so to take the time and to discuss the Constitution and to investigate the ideas that are truly within us to bring forth into our Constitution.
Well, the point, Beulah, is that you can't throw a Constitution together just like that. That's exactly what we're going to get. A Constitution that is thrown together. That was the intention, just like you throw laws together, because there is such a thing as that you can go and buy a package, a model. You want a law, labor law, you go someplace and you get it.
Well, all law is based ultimately on precedent, isn't it? So that.
But not only that, but the profession is a profession where duplications become the norm sometimes. So that, and I think this is perhaps one of my criticisms of law and lawyers, is that sometimes they tend to operate too much within the confines of what is already defined through precedent, and that there have been people there who have had the authority to create those precedents. But on the outside of the courts now, out on the outside of the judicial system, you have people who are making history, and there you have people in a sense who are making it through their personalities and their emotions and the new ways of approaching their culture, the new ways of combing their hair, of dancing, of singing and doing all those things. And the law must therefore evolve to be able to accommodate those changes in society.
Well,
therefore, Parliament being important.
Well, to defend the profession, I think I am duty bound. There is an aspect. There is an aspect of the profession, obviously, the common law that is reflective of exactly that, separate and apart from written legislation, which a government or a legislature might prepare, and that is a very dynamic law and has evolved through hundreds and hundreds of years, and is reflective of the community.
Of the changes within the society, yes.
And individual communities as well, because...
But I wasn't going to really sort of, because I mean, we are people who in politics have always said, like, if we get too many lawyers in our parliament, we're going to really have a problem, because I mean, lawyers really have a particular way of thinking, and maybe I'm not saying this because of you. I may be saying this because of Mr. Alden McLaughlin more than because of you, because my experience of him operating in the Parliament has been very, 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 very interesting to observe. So
I use the term on the first night of the rally, the occupational hazard, and there's no doubt that as lawyers we're trained to think in a certain way. And indeed hold very strong opinions. So I'm not surprised that yourself and Mr. McLaughlin might have locked heads on an occasion or two in the House. But I think that's why there's 15 of us. God forbid, I would agree that there would be 15 lawyers in the Legislative Assembly. But luckily, there are educators, there are sociologists such as yourself, and the collaborative process should be one that could be to the overall benefit, I think, of the community, because legal minds do have their place. I think even you would concede that.
Definitely. That's the reason why we have you on the team, Lloyd, because we do believe that the legal mind has the contributions to make, because we need to, although we have emotions, although we have feelings, they should be structured, and they should be able to operate within specific, defined principles, and therefore, even within the Legislative Assembly, a debate in itself has specific defined principles, and we must therefore operate within that. But one of the reasons why I like your deliveries at the political meeting is because you're not trying to copy us in the way we speak. You are speaking from your very calm, you're very legalistic.
From his discipline.
Yeah, from your discipline. You're not breaking with your discipline, and I think that I admire that. I think that there are a lot of people that have noticed that, and they have admired that.
Well, I think now that you've touched on that, Dr. Frank, and I'm not wanting to in any way direct the discussions, but I believe that the Caymanian voting public at this stage has evolved, and we've been talking about evolution, and they're much more sophisticated. And whilst individual players on the political scene have their own styles, I think we must be careful that what it is that we're attempting to do, especially at this crucial time and at this particular election, is provide the voting public with the sort of information that they can make an informed decision. And I think I would be derelicting my duty if, in fact, I approached it from any other angle.
But coming to the topic of information and providing the public with information, and there's so many people that say that public is really perception, that politics is mainly perception, is what people perceived. That's simplifying it, of course, quite a bit, because if people were provided with accurate information by politicians and by the other institutions that are responsible for disseminating information, then people should be able to go beyond perception. People should be able to state exactly what it is that they believe about the realities in which they are living in, and the other person's presentations with regards to those realities. And that brings us into a very important institution which has been around from the time that we have had democracy, because you cannot have democracy without information. And so that's a very, very, very important thing. If we are going to give people the rights to vote, then they must have the right to have access to information. Therefore, for governments to become more transparent is important. But somebody has to disseminate that transparency. Somebody has to convey that transparency to the general public and to those persons who will use that information later on to vote. And that, in our society, happens to be the media. Media has played a very, very important role in determining elections and shaping perceptions in many countries. And there are those politicians that recognize from the very beginning, if you don't have a good relationship with the media, then the way in which people perceive you through the media will be not as positive, perhaps, as it should be. It brings us to, for instance, one of the papers in the Cayman Islands which I like to speak about, and that is the news, the net news, which is actually the editor-in-chief, I think, is Mr. Desmond Seals. No, I don't think that. I should know that he's in the editor-in-chief of the net news. Now, the United Democratic Party government has been having quite a lot of problems with this particular newspaper and an editor of this newspaper. I, in particular, must say that when I understood at one particular time that there was some type of rift between the newspaper and the leader of government business, the Honorable McKeever Bush, at some particular point, that I continued to support the editor of this newspaper, because I was of the opinion that the media should be free, that it should not be interfered by anyone. But as a result of certain actions by the editor of this newspaper, you begin to think that the newspaper is not free, and you do not make a newspaper free simply because you don't say anything bad about it, or you don't say that the newspaper has influence and that influence might be negative influence. So freedom really does not mean to give somebody the ability to do what they want. Freedom is also the fact that there are responsibilities that each institution in democracy has. In terms of the American Constitution and their idea of freedom of the press, they have themselves had to ask, does that freedom mean that he should have a naked woman on top of the newspaper for everybody to see? No, there are some things that should not be done. And so who tells the media, who says to the media what should be done and what should not be done? who discusses the question of editorial responsibility. We hear about political responsibility. We hear about those politicians and the fact that they must have dignity and they must have responsibility and they must be transparent. But who discusses something as important as newspapers, radios, and television programs in this country? And the reason why I want to bring this out is because at one particular point, after I had supported Mr. Seals against the opinions of the government at one particular point not to put any news ads in his paper, and we fought for that, me and a few other colleagues, and the government decided at least that they would not say that this was a negative newspaper and that it had a negative impact on the Cayman Islands, especially abroad, and therefore those of us who wanted to advertise with the paper should continue to advertise with the paper. I continued to advertise with the paper through my ministry. Not only that, but I think around the time of December 2003, going on 2004, getting ready for the 2004 elections in November, I and Mr. Desmond Seals, who we have known one another for many, many, many years, decided that he persuaded me that what I needed really was that I needed to have his company, which is another company than the news company, be responsible for helping me with my public relations. He seems to have had pretty good ideas about what I should do and what I shouldn't do. I was not necessarily 100% of the opinion that this was necessary since I had the Public Eye show, and I felt that I have done quite a lot to show people how I think and what I'm thinking about and when I'm thinking about these things and how other people think as well. But he was of the opinion that not only should he become involved in creating my Public Eye show, but creating other things for me. And one of the things that he wanted to do was that he wanted to do some PR for me. Now, there are a lot of people that find it very difficult to understand how the person who is the editor, who's a publisher in chief, who seems to determine the editorial direction, can at the same time have a PR firm that is dealing with politicians. I, at that particular point, decided to take his advice and to actually pay him to be a so-called political consultant, since it was his concept, his idea, and he persuaded me of that. And that's the reason why I have the checks in my pocket, because I have checks that was made out on March 2004. And 2004, of course, we would be going towards the elections in November 2004. I have one check here for $5,000. I have another check for $5,000, and that's CI. One in January 2000, because in December when we met, I gave him the first check. This is on December the 27th, 2003. I gave him $5,000 because I wanted to make sure that we launched the campaign early so that we were coming into 2004. And I knew that Beulah was interested in the election, and the truth of the matter is I thought that maybe she might, do well with a little bit of help from the point of the PR. But he came to a point where after Mr. McKeever Bush decided that he was going to bring a suit against him, Mr. Seals called me up and said to me that he was going to take me out and that I was going to be taken out by friendly fire. I said, how friendly can fire be if it's going to take you out? Now, the reason why he was saying that he was going to take me out was because I refused to distance myself from the Honorable McKeever Bush, who he had decided at that particular time that he was going to take out. Now, the interesting thing, if you go back a little distance before my involvement with Mr. Seals, which is documented at least on the 27th of December 2003, and you go back and you look at Mr. McKeever's relationship with Mr. Desmond Seals after the so-called coup in November of 2001, and how Mr. Seals used his newspaper, and he will admit that he used his newspaper to give Mr. McKeever a greater profile than that which he had at that particular time. And he wrote no evil about Mr. McKeever Bush at that particular time. And also his involvement with the Ritz-Carlton that always advertised also on the back of his paper, a full ad on the back of his paper. And everybody who remember that Ritz-Carlton ad on the back of the net news will remember the fact that was, at that particular point, that you could not say anything bad about the Ritz-Carlton development. And all of a sudden, he falls out with Mr. Bush, he falls out with the Ritz-Carlton, and he starts to write whatever it is that he wants to write that is bad. Nothing more is ever positive about them. The same thing happened to me. When he decided at that particular point that I was not going to leave the Honorable McKeever Bush and that he intended to take him out, and he said that to me, that he intends to do that. He will do anything to take him out, anything meaning anything from the point of view of his PR. I am not sure what he'll do in any other terms. I'm not going to say that. But it's important for people to understand that we need to warn people about how he goes after the national housing, how he goes after the hospital, how he goes after everything. And it's very interesting here when he starts to talk about a letter which disturbed retired seamen, and to show how he twists things, how he uses words like, with quite a number of copies of the letter now in circulation. It is reported that one has been given to the elections office, and as a result of the numerous complaints, it is possible that an investigation may be initiated. The supervisor of election, Kearney Gomez, was unable to comment on the letter or its contents, which he said he has seen. But if he's not able to comment, the supervisor of election, then how can the editor of this paper say that an investigation may be initiated? Where does he get the information that an investigation may be initiated? Who initiates investigations into political matters? So he goes on. According to the election law, there are strict guidelines about good conduct during election campaign that dictate that candidates can, or what candidates can or cannot do in the course of a given campaign. The retired seafarer said that this letter from the minister should be considered illegal and contrary to the election law. It is disrespectful to all of us, but not only that, it should be illegal, he added. Several efforts to contact Dr. Frank McPhail for comment on this report was unsuccessful. So you see how he leaves it. He does not even leave the possibility for a comment from me. Now, if you compare that with the news in the Compass, that goes the headline. I think I can't even remember what the headline was, but it did not go that far. And plus, the headline started with the letter. It started with evidence. It started with facts. It started with what I had said. Then it went to the fact that someone was disturbed by what I had said. Then it went to the fact of putting in reports and comments from the past minister, Edna Moyle. Totally different kind of journalism, because even if the person who writes for the Compass is using the headlines to get your attention, at least the person, once he gets your attention, is telling the story. Mr. Seals cannot afford to tell the story. And this is the reason why the United Democratic Party have some very, very serious issue with the way in which he interprets freedom of the press. I don't see how this man can talk about freedom when on one hand he says he wants to be paid, and on the other hand he says, well, he will publish whatever. So the question is, how many politicians now running for election find themselves in a similar position that I found myself in on the 27th of December 2003, where they have hired his PR firm. Now, I'd like him to do an investigation and to tell the public how many politicians have paid or are paying his PR firm, and what kind of influence does that have on the way in which he describes their conduct and their performance. I am asking the people with good sense who understand what I'm saying to begin to boycott the net news, especially the supporters of the Honorable McKeever Bush and the United Democratic Party, not to do this. The reason why we have ads still going in the paper is because one of the checks happened to have been made out to the net news, because when my wife made it out, she didn't make it out to Mr. Seals because she wasn't aware, and so she made it out to the newspaper. So we had a credit. And so we run these ads in order to use up the credit, because there's no other way we're going to get back from it. And I'd like to say this again. If we're talking about democracy, if we're talking about the evolution of the democratic process, if we understand the importance of the dissemination of information to allow people to make decisions about what is good and what is bad about the political performance of their government, then we have to make sure that people who have licensed to operate newspapers are doing so fairly and squarely, and that they're not subverting the process. He asks me to be transparent. They ask us to declare our interests. I'm asking him to declare his, to be transparent about his relationship and what type of pay that he gets in order to promote certain types of people. So whether or not he's running a poll to tell you what is happening in Cayman or not, whatever it is that he's doing, he needs to be more transparent. Now, there was an article also in his net news talking about the rally which was held by the PPM, and I don't know if I can find a copy of that paper. But he says thousands of people, thousands of people, thousands of people. Now, if you hadn't been there, you really believe that thousands of people were there. That is irresponsible journalism. Irresponsible journalism. Mr. Seals approached me the year that he came back from prison to ask me whether or not I would allow him to do a newspaper, do a newsletter for me. He had not started the net news. I was doing the New Vision. The New Vision. I sent newspapers out to people called a New Vision. And according to him, it was okay, but it could be improved. He could do this, he could do that, he could do the other thing. Unfortunately, I was just a poor politician from the block. I had no resources to employ him, and I thought we were doing the job that we needed to do, and so as a result of that, he went on and he was successful in starting something. And the man has worked very hard. He has worked very hard. He works night and day, I know that. But he has to stop, and we have to stop him from manipulating the minds of the people in this country by printing what he wants and not what the facts are. He should be held accountable, just like we should be held accountable. And that is another institution within democracy that if that doesn't work, if there's interference by the press in the political process, you have as much of a problem as when the political process interferes with the press. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know that he will react to this, and he will not be nice, because he understands that when you go as far out as he has gone to determine who the government is going to be in this country, you're taking a terrible risk, and it must be for an incredible price. He has to be very careful that what he does is not totally uncovered, because people are not stupid, and you can fool some of the people some of the time but you cannot fool all the people all the time. And I'm going to get away from Mr. Seals, but I will remind you of the fact that the institution of the press, the media, is as important as any other in determining how your country is run. If they are going to be the ones who take the information from the so-called transparent government or non-transparent government and transport it to you, then they should bring it to you the way they got it. They should not be changing it with their own subjective opinions. Sorry about that one. I mean, we can get to a lighter topic, though.
Before we leave the press, however, though, there are a few comments that I think bear making. I think we'll all agree, and all right-thinking people will agree, that a free and vigorous press is essential to any civilized community. But as you've outlined, there is a certain degree of responsibility, or much responsibility, really, that comes with that freedom. And if we take the current situation with the net news for an example, there have been criticisms of the way campaigns have been conducted from the platform, and people are of the opinion that there's much too much bashing and mudslinging and what have you, and they say that that is bringing the process into disrepute. What I would caution, though, is that you have to also realize that if every day you get up and we read in the papers and there's this dissemination of information, because there is e-news and what have you, it's not just confined to our shores, that the government is corrupt, and that has been a cry that has been raised and given some voice to. And we hear that repetitively, and I think one of the supporters of the opposition, in fact, called in and made just that point on Talk Today, that there is bad information that's out there. What we have to realize is that the government spends millions of dollars regulating our financial industry, promoting our tourism product, and on the whole, enhancing the worldview of the Cayman Islands. That sort of, or anything, journalism or otherwise, that contradicts that process is irresponsible, as equally responsible as any name calling or any other activity that they may want to criticize as part of the campaign process. What I would invite all concerned to do, and I think we all do as well, is deal not so much with scare tactics of corruption and wild-scale graft, but attack the government rather than on policies that you see have failed, things that they have not done. Critique them on performance, as opposed to raising this all-encompassing cry of corruption. I think that is as equally as reprehensible as any other campaign tactic that has evolved during this process. Mr. Seals obviously has taken a certain view, and as you say, one has to be diligent in how one reads things and processes information that one gets from whatever, I suppose, radio house or whatever it emanates from. But it's a tricky business being a kingmaker, and I understand there's a lot of sort of that business going around, and it's bound to be in the election business. But as you say, it's not the responsibility of any editor or any one corporation to attempt to be a kingmaker. If you are demanding a free press and a responsible press, then your job is to disseminate information impartially, and that is really your duty. And any time that you stray from that, you get into very sticky grounds. And I think that has a lot to do with, I suppose, the current atmosphere that exists between the government and the particular newspaper. Yeah. But those would really be my views on the situation.
I think that's the newspaper, any media. We won't just limit it to newspaper, but any media has a right or has an obligation to give news impartially. And as impartially as any human being can do that. But when we take up personal vendettas and we use what is a political, or what is definitely an office of great influence to the people to sell our own poison, I think that we just do a great disservice to the people, because right now there are a number of great issues that could be reported on in the newspaper. There are great arguments to be made, both pro and con, for the opposition, the government, the PDA, or any other person that's running, rather than just looking at the fact like, I need to get back, I need to destroy. And you said, playing the role of the kingmaker is a very dangerous game.
Yes.
And not just to the persons that are personally involved, but to the public as a whole, because of the disinformation that is put out there and how it negatively affects the choices that they make. And that's the danger.
And the feelings that people have towards each other. Politically. I mean, the hardening of a lot of this is also being fueled by the fact that we know that people are sitting there, or at least he's sitting there, pretending that he can determine the outcome of these things.
It must be as well, Dr. Frank, a very tricky line to tread between your functions as the CEO or managing director of a public relations firm and an editor-in-chief of a newspaper. I think they're quite distinct. And again, any blurring of the lines, again, can't be healthy ultimately.
Well, okay,
difficult.
But the reason why I'm saying that is just it's the same thing. If they say, okay, well, I have a trucking company. But that's not acceptable. And he's saying no. What he does is acceptable because he is objective enough to be able to separate the two.
Yes. I think I'm glad you raised that, because we hear the term conflict of interest.
Yes.
I think your situation, and I think good thinking people would realize this, didn't qualify as a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest, to my mind at least, and there may be people that may differ with me on this opinion, but arises where you or any other minister or person in authority utilizes information to which only they are privy, to their own benefit. In August or September of last year, when you bought your trucks, I think that information that the island needed cleaning up and there might be the need for trucks
was available to everyone.
Was available island-wide.
Whoever didn't know. I think a lot of people have used that information because all you got to do is look and see all the trucks around the place. So, and again, Lloyd, and thanks for bringing that up, because sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant in defending myself on those particular levels. But also, had I been the only one allowed to bring in trucks, again, it would have, to me, been
I understand as well, and since we're on conflict of interest, that prior to Ivan or shortly there, I'm not a trucker or a heavy equipment man myself, that it was quite difficult for, say, an independent contractor, a young Caymanian who might have found the funds to purchase a truck, to actually get the truck onto the island and working, because there would have to be, I don't know whether there were licensing issues, but there would have to be an approval from some association or board or what have you before he could do so. And when you look at the composition of those boards, almost invariably, they're comprised by the big players in the industry.
Exactly.
To my mind, that is a conflict of interest. By extension, and touching back on, I suppose, the net news, there is a series of questions asked. I think the 20 questions or what have you, everybody should be familiar with that, concerning whether ministers should be allowed to have companies and what have you. I'm at a loss as to why a community or the voters or electors would want to have a minister or any person in government that is solely dependent on the earnings from that position as a government minister. Then I think it makes the job that much more fraught with difficulties. It should be encouraged, I think, that ministers can make a living, anybody can make a living outside of the government, rather than having to rely strictly on a government salary. But clearly assets have to be declared.
Yeah, right.
And we must be diligent when it comes back to the same conflict of interest situation.
And
but why would you want to leave a man?
Historically, ministers have had that privilege.
In fact, there have been some of our biggest businessmen.
Yes. Yeah. For instance, some of the biggest law firms have grown out of that connection.
Yeah, I mean, mention Mr. Truman Bodden, who started as a young lawyer, entered the politics. If you mention Mr. Captain Charles Connell, if you mention Mr. Norman Bodden, if you mention whoever, I mean, who can't?
Mr. Benson. They didn't have to diverse themselves. They did not have to diverse themselves of any business, and indeed that business was allowed to grow.
And the advance in the Cayman Islands was when we said here that you had to declare your interest. It would be a register of interest, and you would have to declare it, but not that you would have to devour yourself.
Without it, it makes the job too important to the politicians. You don't know what a man is going to do to preserve his livelihood, if it's the only livelihood that he has.
That's what I thought, too. You don't want to get to that extreme point where you'll do anything to keep your job, to survive. You want to.
You know, the thing again is looking at other societies and other places, and this is a historical thing for every nation. I mean, in the United States, in England, Jamaica, wherever, politicians ultimately need to have another life.
They have another life, as a matter of fact. A lot of people think we don't have any other life, but we do have. We have children, we have wives, we have mothers,
and businesses.
And, you know, we have responsibilities, and you know. But I you know, to tell you the truth, because I didn't buy the trucks in any case, I leased the trucks, and I was a little bit sort of ambitious, I think, because I don't think that I'm necessarily a good businessman, but
join the club.
I wanted to do something. There was a possibility that it would be a good time to start something. But just like I had a good idea, a lot of other people had a good idea. And you know what happens when too many people have a good idea?
Yes.
Some people lose money, and that's what's happened to me.
Yes.
But you know,
the free market always determines fuels are very.
Of course, there's some people that would prefer that if we say we limit it to a few of those. And you were asking the question, before you had an organization called HEHO. That would be like the Scots and the Bordens. And that goes all the way back to Mr. Jim Borden regime, when they were only satisfied when they were the only people. Mr. Rupert Moxon, for instance, was one of the people in that. When they would be the only people, the small little group that would have a monopoly on heavy equipment in this country, so that they could set the price, and there would be nobody that could come in to compete, and therefore it would not be the market factors that would determine, but the mere fact that they had access to the government that made the decision. And at that particular point, they participated in the decision-making process. It wasn't the government so much as them, although it came under the Ministry of Tourism because of Mr. Jim Borden. And that is why today it's still under the Ministry of Tourism. And Mr. McKeever's approach that has been completely different. So young people who want to bring in trucks have been allowed to bring in trucks. People who want to bring in aggregate have been able to come and bring in aggregate. It's not the monopoly that people had before is no longer there, and that is what upset a particular class of people in this country, the fact that they cannot secure their businesses by preserving a monopoly.
I think it's ultimately healthier, though, that obviously that the market is opened up, and that persons have a chance not only to participate. From that point of view alone, it's laudable, but also it ultimately benefits the Caymanian consumer.
It does.
And it should all be about the consumer.
And that's what open and free market is all about. I mean, you can't preach democracy, and you can't shout capitalism and then go around acting on a socialist type of ideology where
communist, not socialist. That's the way that they do it in Cuba. I mean, they're like, you can have this, the government will have a part of this, and this one can't have this, and everybody is limited, because that's the only way they know how to do things, is by limiting the entrepreneurial desires that people have. But entrepreneurial ideas and desires that people have can also lead them into great economic and financial issues. But that's why we have companies, that you can form a company so your liabilities are limited. So the experience capitalist countries are not going to hold you,
Exactly.
at ransom simply because you have not been able to be successful
But
economically.
it causes people to expand their thought and their boundaries, because they have to be innovative in order to stay ahead of the game, rather than just sitting around and doing things the same old way all the time. So,
And Lloyd, the whole thing is that there are a lot of people that think that without capitalism, you wouldn't have democracy. And without democracy, you wouldn't have capitalism, because the two are complementary.
Indeed.
So you're not going to have a truly democratic country unless you begin to take risk. And even our relationship to labor here in this country, in terms of and Gordon Barlow has said this many times, and a lot of people don't want to understand what he's saying, but free labor is a very important part of capitalistic development. I should have as much access to that labor as you have, but then you say, no, I brought him in on a work permit, and you can't get him. If anything, he has to go, and you have to bring in another one.
As you speak of that, a very interesting topic arose again on Talk today, and because Joel's my friend, they're going to think I'm touting him or accuse me of touting him on the airways. But again, a very interesting, I think he was in converse, he had guests on who raised the issue, and there were callers subsequently who discussed it with him. The question of mobility of persons on permits, and whether that ultimately is beneficial to what we would call the native Caymanian. The idea that one isn't necessarily indentured to a particular employer rather, so that the permit then is at large.
It should be at large.
And
yes,
that other agencies then can compete for your services.
Yeah.
The thinking is that it would bring a parity to the workforce, because a lot of our Caymanians, and we're a proud set, and simply will say, look, I'm not doing that job for $5 an hour or $4 an hour, because I'm worth more than that, and they take that attitude.
Right.
But the balance isn't there, because you can hire a foreign national who maybe can do it for 3 or 4. But if there was that mobility of a foreign worker, then an employer, a particular employer, then would be more likely to treat that employee with some value, and so that if they knew that tomorrow, if you paid him for, just like they came in, and he would be gone.
Exactly.
Exactly. You give people rights. You give people rights. You go back to slavery.
Exactly.
You give people rights, and they move. They have mobility, because unless you force a person to stay in a position, they will go to the position that they feel their self-interest is being served.
And it's saying very little about us as a nation if we have the only way that we feel that we can compete, and the only way that we feel that we can offer a product is through slave labor. Really.
But Beulah, what we have to understand again is the historical development. The people who created these first immigration laws, why they created them. And I always say, no, they were not created to protect the working Caymanians.
No.
They were created to protect those employers, that those employers would be able to indenture labor, and that they would be able to keep the Caymanians from being able to negotiate for higher wages. And I don't know that we have the same need today. I think that the people who have gone into business, the people who are in business, are quite willing to compete for an employee by treating the employee in a good way and by rewarding the employee properly. And that if I can get a good employee, that you shouldn't say, oh, that employee is my employee. You should not be able to possess
a person.
You see, and we're still there. But you would say, okay, well, I've given this amount of permits to come in, because we know we need this amount in this area and that area, and people go up and down as they have to,
right.
and as they're needed to move up and down. But the idea that they continue to say the reason why you have to structure a person in one job is to protect Caymanians is nonsense. I have the same thing from the Contractors Association. I noticed there was an article
I noticed that
in
as
the
well.
Compass about basically talking about some companies that have been trying to get bids for the affordable housing. Now, it's interesting that since we have made decided that we would like to get these 72 apartments built, that we had the tendering process that was supposed to end on April the 1st, because of course there's been the desire in the country for permanent accommodations, and I would have liked to have done a little bit before my period in office is finished as well. But we extended that to the 4th of May in order to give these contractors the possibility. These contractors end up, rather than giving us a proposal so far, discussing what they can do with the press. Now, you don't discuss it with the press, you discuss it with the potential employer. One of the criticism, of course, that they have is that, you know, they employ local people and they buy local materials and blah, 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 and they come out with this thing that local, and everybody's supposed to be fooling and think that's true. Because even the contractors that are talking about this are foreigners themselves.
Indeed.
Not just the people that they employ, but they themselves are foreigners.
Yeah, when I look at what I read that story with great interest this afternoon.
It's a great proposal.
And my mouth just dropped open. And the only thing it reminded me of is cable and wireless, and how, you know, for years and years as a customer, you would call cable and wireless and you would complain, why can't the rates go down? It is terrible. The rates are too high. You're too hard on us as customers. Is there nothing you can do? And they would look you in the face without a twitch, batting of an eye, and say, we cannot lower the rates. Well, lo and behold, competition comes in. And not only do they lower the rates, but they go lower than any of the competition in order to drive the competition out. And all I can say to this is, this proves that you could have done it all along.
Right.
At any particular point in time, cable and wireless could have become a truly good corporate citizen and given fair rates. It's the same with the contractors. At any point in time, they
but
could
not just the contractors. There are a few contractors who call themselves the Contractors Association. The majority came out of contractors out there. It's a totally different thing.
The association.
And it's led by people who know the benefit of preserving monopolies.
Exactly. I mean, when I read I was looking at the National Gender Policy, and one of the issues that were in it that were hard hit, especially to women, to families, was the lack of appropriate low-income housing. And I'm thinking, they're writing this and they're saying that even the crimes and the youth gangs that we're seeing on our streets are a direct result of overcrowding and a lack of space and a lack of proper low-income housing. And so when you think of all of this and you think that these contractors from the association are having to build walled communities because of the growing social problems and the crime, and they could have impacted it in a positive way to lessen it by building what they say now that they can do. It's incredible. Yes. It's absolutely incredible.
I've known you since I was a youngster, Dr. Frank, and I know you're a doer. You're a man of action. But I'm glad that you allowed the extension. I think by doing so, you have placed the proverbial ball in their court. It is time now then for the contractors, whoever they may be, to come forward with what we consider to be feasible studies and proposals that we can look at. If it is that they don't, then they shouldn't be heard to complain, because they have been allowed an opportunity. I think
sorry, Lloyd, but sorry, but they're going to complain anyway. I think that's why it's sometimes hard for me to treat them serious. That's one reason why they go to the press and they don't go to the National Housing Community Development Trust with the proposal. They have enough time to go to the press, but they don't have enough time to sit down and actually give the proposals, because they know they will be most likely embarrassed by their own proposals. Because I read between the lines what they were saying, and I'm saying, this is how can they do this and how can they do that? So it's still politics. It's still that idea that let's keep on at Frank about the affordable houses. Let Jill Langloh, let him keep on with this whole thing. But he knows that what was being asked for by Andrew Gibbs. I'm not the technical person. I have a person who is our consultant who makes decisions with regards to these issues. I don't make those decisions. It's up to him. When they suggested to me, hey, well, let's give them an extension, and I said, okay, well, let's go. We'll give them an extension, because if that's what they're crying for, but then they go to the press to discuss what they can do with the press. Why? I would be there working to get my projects together very hard, night after night, night after night, to make sure that I have everything in place. It's a lot of work.
Well, that was the cry, that it was such a complicated process that the time allowed couldn't possibly have been enough.
My understanding of what the technical person was saying, and I asked him to say that, and I didn't get involved in saying it because I don't think that I have the knowledge and the kind of background to be able to say it, is simply this, guys. We're not asking you to come in with this. We just want to know if it's possible. Give us enough information that we can believe that it's possible to work with you at what we consider to be affordable levels.
That's right.
That's all. You know, but to say, oh, cry down in the press and cry me out in the press, and this is just like what the opposition have done. And with housing again, and we had those statistics which I gave you. I don't know if you remember, because we were saying that when we worked on this, that we know that the 1999 statistics
Here
said
it is. The 1999 census report that rental properties accounted for 49%, or 7,265 of the total number of households on the island. A further 6% were provided rent-free. 22%, or 3,280, were owned outright, and 23%, 3,300. Where am I?
3,383
owned
with mortgage.
With the mortgage. Thus, nearly one half of the population depended on rented property.
Of the 15,108 persons who lived in rented accommodation in 1999,
21% were Caymanians.
Yes. And this is in contradiction or when compared to at least one of our Caribbean neighbors, and I can't remember where I read this, and we often criticize our Caribbean neighbors and suggest sometimes that we're light years ahead. But Barbados, for example, there's very encouraging statistics, and I think one of them is that 75% of Barbadians own their own homes in Barbados, and it is clearly a factor, home ownership, and that impinges seriously on community development. And what I think can't be denied, and no matter what happens come May, it'll be a lasting legacy of your ministry and the UDP government that you actually did something, about affordable housing, a topic or issue that was paid so much lip service prior to your taking action when you did. And the thing is, why I say it'll be a lasting legacy is because any subsequent government, UDP or not, should be embarrassed not to continue to look at the project and to continue with programs that seek to address the needs of affordable housing in the community. I think you've started the ball rolling, and there should be no turning back, and indeed it'll be a glowing legacy of your government and of your ministry.
I mean, one of the things, and I really, for me, I take my hat off to Dr. Frank. I think he really read this report, and it impacted him, and he knew he needed to do something about housing. One of the things that they point out here is many were unable to afford decent housing due to high cost of construction and mortgage schemes. Both things Dr. Frank has tackled in his ministry. Not only has he reduced the cost of constructing these homes, but he's now gone ahead and created a mortgage scheme that is affordable.
Yeah, because you got to understand that they pay 8.5% fixed over 20 years. Yes. And we borrowed that money, and people qualify differently. People that would not have qualified at the bank now have access to it.
What do you think were some of the root causes behind previous governments, and there have been many, so we're not pointing any fingers at any particular group of men. They've all contributed to their society and in very positive ways. And I touched on that last night when I said that the people aspect of our development has been neglected, and that it has been neglected in preference to infrastructural development and the passage of legislation that encourage our industries. We're not down crying that, because obviously that is essential and it must be maintained, and that relationship must be enhanced. But what do you think are some of the reasons behind the reluctance to tackle something as fundamentally important as housing? If I might ask a question, you've been asking a question.
Well, I think, Lloyd, and it's a very difficult question, because I don't want to necessarily come down on the character and the charity of some of our predecessors, but I do think that this whole issue of whether or not housing plays an important role in determining social behavior is still on the board. There's some people who still believe that if you give them the houses, they're going to create the ghettos. They're not going to create better lives for themselves. I had to fight that concept. I fought that concept. So even when we had won on a particular level, when I had more or less gotten the movement started, people are saying, well, what are you going to do? You're going to put these poor people in these places together and they're going to create more poverty. But the housing does not create the poverty. The poverty is created by people being left behind.
Yes.
It's not created by the fact that we go and try to find better accommodations for them to rear their children, because we want to give them greater parental responsibilities, but we don't want to support them. And so bringing social programs into your country is sometimes resisted by people who think that you're a socialist when you are doing these particular types of beneficial things to the community. But my point is, if we don't balance the society, if we don't try to do some things to create harmony, then we will lose the wealth. And we will lose the safety.
Yes.
And so that we have to, within our means, without going into a direct taxation and all that sort of stuff, we still have to use some of the money accumulated to make the lives, or at least attempt to make the lives of poorer people better off.
You would have thought that astute businessmen would follow that line of reasoning, just as we, and I'm sure many of the viewing public or other persons, have followed that. Clearly you have to create the sort of environment that allows your business to thrive, and
Exactly.
one filled with disharmony.
Well, you know how many people, how many objections we have now for building these apartments in that side in Eastern Avenue. You know how many objections we got from building them in Fairbanks.
Yes.
There, people don't want poor people to exist. It's unfortunate. But the majority of the people in the world are poor, and the majority of the people in Cayman are low-income people. They have to get away. They have to wake up to that.
But you know what that says to me, and I'm just listening to what you're saying, Dr. Frank, and it's stunned me. When people say that the low-income houses, they're going to turn them into slums. And I think that the people that are coming out of the low-income homes are coming from areas like Central, from the swamp, Rockhole. Are they then saying that those areas are swamp, are ghettos? I mean, what are they saying?
They don't even come in those areas.
What are they saying?
I mean, that's part of the issue.
These are the old Caymanian homes and homesteads.
But poverty becomes something that many people are afraid of. And they're afraid of it because they came from it in the first place. And those of us that have come from poverty never want to go back there. And so I can see the reaction of some professional middle-class people to that, especially those that are not Caymanian, that we have made Caymanian, that are now looking down on those same Caymanians having a place to live. So I don't too much want to go into it, but we knew from the very beginning that Georgetown was the area that most needed it because of the commercial development and the fact that people could no longer pay for property, the fact that their families no longer had the property to divide, and even when they could divide it, there's nothing that they could have done with it. So the point was is that we had to use what available land we could get access to. And this is one of the reasons why filling the land was so expensive, because we got the worst land in the world. The piece on Eastern Avenue is not too bad, but the Windsor Park piece of land, my God, that was terrible to fill, because it's one of the highest points in Georgetown and one of the lowest points in Georgetown. But the point is, if people have no sympathy, so it's not just Frank Macfield they're criticizing my affordable housing, they're criticizing poor people.
Well,
that's basically what it's all about.
To be truly civilized, or one of the indicators of how civilized a community or a person is, I think an indication of that is how well they treat those who are underprivileged, who are weaker, who are unable to, for whatever reason, meet what we consider to be the standards, the aged, the handicapped, those sorts of sectors of the community. How you treat those people, the persons who have fallen on hard times, just financially.
Single parents.
How you look after. Even animals, I suppose.
Yeah, well,
it is an indicator of your civility and your humanity.
And you were raising, very good points in very, very rational manner. Like you said, from the time I know you, we created the National Youth Theater.
Yes.
It was in theater. It became the Cultural Foundation. It spawned cultural movement, museum, archives, the bit in the country. When we were doing these things, everybody was turning their nose up on the people that were doing it and the fact that we were doing these things. That's one reason why when people ask me what I've done in my country, I can point to how I have changed things, not all the things that I've done, but I can at least point to where I think I have done something significant to change people's relationship with each other and people's relationship with society.
Those were very exciting times, and I'm very proud to have been a part of it.
And I did use you in one of the pictures in the 1996 campaign. I had a picture of you in the campus. I used that as an ad because I did use that background in the theater as a way of elevating myself, my involvement with boxing, of course, from those days. And so I'm very emotive about my society, my relationship to it, and I'm very, very determined sometimes, especially when I'm challenged by rude, monopolistic people who believe that somehow none of us have any sense. And I take an offense when they think that I do not understand the philosophy that they are living. Affordable houses is more of a problem to them because they don't know what to do with people who are poor.
Yes.
They don't know what to do with people who are poor. And so even when we go and say, look, we're going to create a community development unit that works with the people. We're not just going to create houses, we're creating communities. We're not going to make the mistake that they're made in other countries. But we cannot make people good, but we can give them the opportunities.
Because I believe, not to cut you, that a part of and I'm not sure how many people actually know this, but it is an all-encompassing program. It's not simply just the affordable housing, because you've tied in with it the Children and Family Services unit and all the other related bodies. So that I believe you even have officers assigned to a particular housing site, so that they might there might be that intervention and that recourse to government assistance, and not just financially. When I say assistance, obviously, whether it be counseling.
Babysitting, while you go out and get a job, helping you to do referrals, develop your attitudes and social skills. And we were supposed to have community centers, little small community centers in all the units. But the hurricane came, and not only did we suffer some destruction, but we had to go into recovery mode. We have
sometimes these things are a blessing in disguise.
Exactly.
It may allow for reflection and perhaps even adjustments that may prove to be ultimately more beneficial.
Well, I think that's what happened. I think this actually has given us the possibility to reflect again, and this is the reason why we came up with the concept of the apartments, which of course is not the same as a house, but we feel that in the District of Georgetown in particular, that it has become more urbanized, and the commercial value of land does not allow us.
But we
to
simply
afford.
don't have the space.
We don't have the space, and so that is one of the big issues, and I like to say too, Lloyd, when we go into the West Bay community, we see that is very, very, very organized, very wholesome, very developed.
Yes.
Where we find on Eastern Avenue is where we got our big lick. And we have not tried to go in there to correct the problem, because we intend to put these 72, I think, apartments in there. What we want people to understand is that we're waiting for the contractors to come with a plan that will be affordable, because at the end of the day, yeah, anybody can build 72 apartments, but they have to build them at a price that people can afford them. And before we started, yes, we could build houses, but the houses that we could build were not affordable to very low-income people. And Lloyd, these people are not getting a free house from government. They're borrowing the money from the National Housing Community Development Trust, and every month they come to pay their mortgage, and over a 20-year period, they will pay their mortgage. If they were renting, they wouldn't even be able to rent as cheap as they're paying for these houses in any case. So I don't know what the crime is, because if we should fail to collect the rents, and if we should have a lot of delinquency, and people didn't really pay, then the government would have a financial obligation to the bank that we borrowed the money from. But we protected the people. But so my first thing was to protect the people, not to protect the government, and to protect them from any raise in rent, so that they know over 20 years, even if they get an improvement in their salaries over the next 3 or 4 years, they don't have to pay more mortgage.
I think the duty then falls to you or any subsequent minister to be doubly sure that the project we settle on is cost effective, so that there is that balance between protecting the people, but at the same time, in a sense, protecting the government.
Well, how we protect the government is by putting the social people in there to work to people with people, so that we know beforehand if there's going to be delinquency. If we know that people are having problems, we want them to come to the social workers, social development workers, report it, and we work to try to get them back to work by solving the problem. That's how the government is protected.
I see.
And also, when we look at that, you have to look at the fact right now, after Ivan, I mean, the cost of rentals have almost doubled. So this is a double blessing for them at this time, to be able to own a home at a fixed rate.
Yes.
There's no report in the papers, no report at all in the papers from anybody living in the house. Why is it that no paper? And I've asked Alan Markoff, I say, why don't you go and ask some of these people
and
living
interview
in
them.
And interview some of these people. Why are you sticking with the contractors for? Go talk to these people.
Find out how their lives have been impacted by owning a home.
This was a recent story, so let's give Mr. Markoff the benefit of the doubt and say that as a follow-up.
He's planning to go.
As a follow-up.
Right. Lloyd, you're a great diplomat. We need you. You'll help me out a little bit here, because sometimes I run short of the patience to have the diplomacy after, when you're going through it, and you know that somehow, and he's written some good things, because he has them telling us what they want to do. And obviously it's very important that...
But it's instructive in the sense that the populace now knows that there are these persons
who can do it,
right. and that and so that at the end of the day, if they're not able to produce, then as we say, the ball is in their court.
I still think they'll make another excuse, because they're excuse finders. But anyway, we would come to this whole issue of the of housing, because housing is a very important aspect of community development, and a very important way of a country, like you say, showing its civility and its humanity. because we talk about juvenile delinquency, and the reports have suggested, and I believe that many times, because of the lack of space, we have conflict of authority. You imagine if you have a single woman and 3 kids living in one room, and the age difference between those kids are extreme.
And gender differences.
And
gender
gender
difference.
differences.
Yeah.
It becomes very, very difficult to maintain the kind of social cohesiveness and balance within that particular family unit. But if we say that the family is such an important unit for the society, and we talk about the family, but we don't seem to be talking about poor people's families, just maybe talking about rich people's families.
Talking about the 2.5.
2.5. But we need to talk about families, and those families need to be poor people's families. If they are such an important social unit in terms of maintaining social stability, then it is correct for the government to invest in families and not stand by and say, well, if you can't make it yourself, then you have to drown. Because when they're drowning, we're ending up with all these kids who the government still has to step in and institutionalize and pay a lot more money than we could distribute if we are being proactive by dealing with the issues as we see them.
Yes. I think importantly, and I think it's a fact that that occupies a lot of people's minds, the question of how are we going to pay for and how are we going to afford the sort of social programs that are undeniably needed and required. And again, I think it would be a legacy of the UDP government, just as housing was, that they have been innovative almost in matters of raising funds, of generating funds. We see that, and luckily so, that they turned around a situation from a deficit to a position in 3.5 years where there was some $80 million available by way of surplus. And we say luckily so because obviously we know that a lot of that has now been spent in the recovery areas, and I would hate to have thought if that performance hadn't been there, the sort of position we'd be in today. But quite apart from that, what we saw them do as well is look to perhaps those sectors of the economy that could afford to sort of make additional contributions, as it were, to the government's coffers. Traditionally, there was, you would raise duties on essential products, but I think the UDP were astute enough to realize that that is finite, and that you can only tax the working man, the essential products, only so much. And there had to be a need to put together, I suppose, those innovative packages. And having said that, there's clearly a need then, I think we all accept, to encourage big business, to encourage merchants, to encourage financial institutions, so that, again, the funds are available to institute social programs. But as an aside, I would have thought, and I would propose, and I have a line of thinking that says that there needs to be a greater public-private partnership. Because if we follow a line of thinking that we provide an environment by way of the financial regulations and the maintenance of good order generally, we provide a platform for which businesses and institutions can make vast amounts of money, then there should be as well that good conscience, not simply by way of charity, and there are companies who do quite a lot and will continue to do a lot, but more importantly in terms of their corporate strategy. What I mean by that is that there has to be people-friendly products for example, the insurance situation where we find people facing astronomical costs. There has to be people-friendly products, and I must commend some of the companies. I think Fidelity, Heritage, through Scotiabank are working a program whereby a person's insurance premium, what have you, can be financed, because let's face it, that is the only way that homeowners, or certain homeowners, are going to meet those sorts of obligations. So people-friendly products, but as well, I think, as a revenue-earning measure, one would have thought that entrepreneurs need to have more access to capital, because business is capital-driven. And I think we need to encourage that sort of partnership where we're lending institutions and other institutions. It's not enough that the government has to look to their own coffers and find $6 million to encourage small businesses. Yeah. I think there must be that partnership with the private sector where there's more access. Because the spin-off is that the more business clearly that you create and you develop, then the more the returns for government, to the government coffers.
Well, I mean, that's all very logical, but unfortunately, I think that my senses tell me that people are still very selfish, and that part of the role of government is to allow for individuals and institutions to behave in a way that is a little bit more collective, and it is a little bit more socially responsible. We have tried to develop a society here where individual businesses have come and individual businesses have done donations and played responsible roles in our society in terms of assisting with the overall development of the Caymanian society, the small businesses, giving Caymanians jobs and different things like that. But I don't think that although we have called for it, many governments have called for it, and we need to call for it again. We need to have in the back of our mind, though, that if a certain amount of coercion is needed to bring that about, then it must be used, because it is better to have that degree of coercion than to allow the society to disintegrate, and for everybody to be in turmoil, and for wickedness to take over your society with the violence.
But you see, that is the flip side of it, coercion. That we then increase fees and whatever. It's a no-win situation. That too is fine, because then you make the businesses non-competitive in comparison to other jurisdictions, and it doesn't suit anybody. So what needs to be encouraged is a sort of dialogue between the parties that illuminates that we don't want every time that we need additional revenue that we have to come to you and say, look, we're going to increase the cost of doing business. The alternative is that you make funds available, make capital available, so that there is a general sort of enlivenment of the business industry, that we can get these benefits from.
I mean, I'm understanding what you're saying, and I know what Dr. Frank is saying as well. It again goes back to the fact that people tend not to want to do those things. Why should I give up? If I'm allowed to come in, set up business, and make this amount of money, then why should I change that in order to give to society to do that? So a certain amount of coercion is needed, and we know that you cannot legislate morality, and that's what's needed, the heart. You can't, the charity. And unless they find it within themselves, it's not going to happen. But one of the things that we can look at is to look at it and say your very safety now has become an issue, because crime has increased, violence has increased in our islands, and this, again, going back to the report, is linked directly to poverty and unhealthy social conditions.
And people not being able to work in Beulah. When we started the hurricane recovery cleanup, and we had so many people come out, hundreds of people came out to work and do jobs cleaning up streets,
cleaning the streets.
Caymanian people. And you know why, Lloyd? Because they were getting a good salary, a good wage,
a good fair salary.
So it's the low pay. The low pay and some types of dynamics that takes place in the workplace that causes them to say, look, it's better for me to stay home. And I'm saying this to say that if we can increase wages in some places, it would help. to attract people, and it would be a worthwhile investment. Now, if your business is too small to pay a better wage, and the government wanted to subsidize that in order for you to hire certain people, that might be a wise thing too. But I'm saying it comes a point when you know it's a hard decision. If you use coercive means, and what we call coercive means, we mean from the point of view of revenue, a tax, whether or not that's an indirect tax or not. But through indirect taxation, we are able to coerce revenue. If we create a situation where the companies here have to pay more than the companies elsewhere, the business people here are going to say, oh, we are going to be non-competitive when compared to the other place. But if the other place doesn't do it too, if the other place doesn't take care of its crime and its social problem, the other place is not going to exist either.
Yeah.
But you're going to have people coming from the other place to your place because your place is a safe place.
Yes. Yeah, but I think we can make much headway without because I believe in appealing to reason. In that, if we realize that there must be that ceiling, that we can only tax these companies and institutions so much.
And we can only tax our people so much.
Exactly.
And
So
if a society does not have money, it's just like anybody who else don't have money.
But if both sides of the coin accept that there is that ceiling,
well,
then the only alternative
if you can give me a model,
but
if you can give me a model of where that has been achieved, I buy that idea right now.
It is. It's very interesting.
Show me a model.
It's very interesting because even when you look at the U.S., I mean, their greatest thing, and one of the reasons why the Republicans are still in power today, really has more to do with finances and economy than Christianity, as some people would think. What happens is that under there, what we say is, look, we're not going to tax you as much. We're not going to have you be any more social conscious than you want to be. One reason why tax havens or offshore develops is the fact that people don't want to be socially responsible. So to become that type of a jurisdiction and then look at the people and say, but we want you to be socially responsible here. Well, why don't we just go back home and be socially responsible?
I don't think we're asking them to really be socially responsible. We're putting forward an argument that ultimately we're saying inures to their benefit as much as it does to ours. Because what we're asking them to do is make those funds available that encourages business.
Wow.
Not only does the encouragement of business means that we no longer have to solely look to you for returns or taxation, but
you think that people you think people are purely rational then, huh?
No, I think there are enough rational souls when it comes to finances, because what you're doing is saying to them, you're appealing to the bottom line.
A typical example is the trust fund that was set up for the hurricane relief. A typical example. And I know that we got ideas, and I know we should use our ideas and our imagination, but we also have to use precedent as well. We have just come out of a very terrible situation. Yes. Where did the money come from? It came from the coffers of the government of the Cayman Islands. Okay? Nobody has broken down. There are a few people have given something, and God bless them, and more people should do it. What the Darts just did with the parks, have been doing with the park, incredible. That's incredible too. We need more people to do it, and I agree with you. If that happens, then there's no reason to use coercion, but government has to be intelligent enough and brave enough to preserve the balance, because that's important for everybody, including the people who have a lot of money. There are a lot of people in a lot of countries that have a lot of money that had to run with that money. Because the crime and the violence came to the point where they had to run with it, and they didn't use their social conscience and their experiences to know, let's try to deal with this situation.
So you say history is bound to repeat itself?
I'm not saying history is bound to repeat itself. No, I'm saying that we're bound to know history so that we can find compromises, but we should not be led astray by believing that people volunteer to give up any part of their wealth.
No, I wasn't under that illusion at all. I am contemplating formulating a sort of argument that would say to them that to do otherwise financially you suffer.
I know.
they're more likely to listen to that argument than to appeal to their good conscience.
Well,
I agree with you.
I can just take you back to 2000 when we came in as a government, 2001, and we had to find a budget.
Yes.
And all the uproar, and all of the complaints, and all of the threats, and all of the begging that we did not put those additional taxes on companies.
But you see,
on thing. But at the end of the day, they have made more.
But that is
and that argument would have meant like the other government would have gone back and taxed the people.
Yeah.
You know what Kurt Tibbetts them did when they first came in? They took away they put back duties on food stuff. You know, the last thing that I did in 2000 was to bring a motion to remove duties from food stuff.
Successful.
Okay. And
that's why I say, Doc, that the legacy.
The first thing they did was to go back and tax the poor people again.
But that's why I say that it is a sterling legacy as well of the party that realized that was unworkable and that we needed to look elsewhere. But as coercive as you had to be, and all the bogeyman connotations, if you tax them more, they're going to leave and what have you. And we actually see that, as you say, there have been increases in registered companies.
Sure, and as a matter of fact, we got a lot of people that have been given Caymanian status.
Yes. But that's encouraging.
So where are they supposed to? Why are they going to go? If this is the society that they have chosen, this society they live. But we are the one who have to bring them the message. That's why we're in the government.
Yeah. And we do that.
And that's exactly
by dialogue.
what we did.
By dialogue, because I think we can achieve much more in that. For years we were reluctant to do it. We did it. We see the benefits, and I think that should encourage us to continue that dialogue.
One thing that we must also look at with the United Democratic Party was once they made that initial increase in taxes to the business community, they then put into play their special skills of good fiscal management.
Indeed.
So that in the 3.5 years they have not had to go back and tax anyone.
Yes.
Right.
I think,
but I mean, let's not jump away from the argument that if you're going to run a country, you have to have money, because everybody ducks that one. And I am saying that the United Democratic Party, especially under the leadership of the Honorable McKeever Bush, have negotiated with the business community, have informed the business community, have dialogued with them, and have found no need to go back to them for additional monies. But we have to also understand that the poorer people in this country cannot continue to pay for the standard of living in this country that people are able to come here and enjoy. If people in other countries escape it, they eventually be faced with it. I was in Provo, Turks and Caicos. They're developing fast. They had a policeman that was shot. Okay? They have serious crime issues and developing fast. And you have to be really, really, really careful with this concept that if you all we're going to do is to try to just be cheaper than someplace else. Well, maybe you're inexpensive, you're cheaper than the other person, but at the end of the day, you can't supply people with what's important for them, which is their safety.
well, you see, I think knowing some of the figures, and I'm indebted to a player in the financial industry who I had the privilege of speaking with when I got involved in this process, sort of picking his brain. And he was in fact a caller, again, on Talk Today, God forbid, when certain figures were outlined that show you the sort of leeway that we have in terms of the room to play with. It is estimated that the hedge fund industry, and we know that Cayman is a big hedge fund jurisdiction, our share of it globally amounts to hundreds of billions of dollars. The total contribution by the financial sector, which includes hedge funds, to our economy was in the region of 60 million. So that if we say that hedge funds is but a part of that 60, we see that we're talking perhaps 10 to 20 million. Yet under management, there is these hundreds of billions. So I think that there is room, without getting non-competitive and without impinging on their ability to do business and not making our jurisdiction unattractive, there is room for perhaps a slight improvement in the contribution, and that is just hedge funds. Mutual funds are much more, we're not talking lending institutions, nothing like that.
The thing that I'm making, and I don't really want to continue on this particular level because I don't think that we are going to be able to solve that. Your opinion, I think that I'm using a little bit, not just some opinion, but some experiences here. Not what somebody said, but what I have experienced in terms of sitting down and talking to people in a very, very, very controversial type of situation, having to raise revenue for the country, having not wanting to go back to the poorer people to get more revenue. Understanding of course that these companies have grown, that people come here and they do have a good lifestyle. That's why they want to stay. That's many of them wanted Cayman status. Understanding that although I don't want to directly go in and talk about any direct taxes whatsoever, that there are contributions that can be made from companies that they have. But knowing that there are individuals who work with these companies, who are partners in these companies, who want to take home a bigger share, who want to compete with the Joe Blow who's made it. Let's keep up with the Joneses. Let's not sacrifice one penny out of our pockets. So there is a certain selfishness that exists in all societies, and part of the role of government is to have the right to bridge that gap, especially at critical times. That's why police have special powers. That's why politicians and judiciary, those types of institutions have. It is not saying that the economic institutions play less of a role, but there are certain institutions that represents everybody. Businesses help everybody at the end of the day, but they help the persons who own them first of all, and most of all. And so there has to be some social balancing. I don't think the same way that the Honorable McKeever Bush thinks about these things, because I'm coming from a different perspective, and I don't think the same way that you necessarily think about it. I think that we all think together, and it helps us to come out with a viable solution. But the opposition is now saying that they do not intend to create direct taxation. They intend to depend on indirect taxation. But yet everybody is suggesting how we're going to solve all these problems. So is somebody blind about the realities, or somebody hiding the truth, or what it is? Government has the right to do what is best for everybody. When the time comes, they have to act for everyone. But we know that taxation is not something that make the leaders of industries happy. But we also know that when you have a crime wave that needs to be solved by perhaps bringing in more money to pay for more equipment that is more capable of protecting them, that they can be persuaded, and they should be persuaded by their own minds. But if they are not persuaded by their own minds, and they're the ones who are capable of donating towards it, then they're not the only people that have to be protected. The poor guys in the poor neighborhoods also have to be protected, and that is where government has to come in.
The age-old question, who are we developing for? It raises its ugly head.
We have to do that.
If
anyway,
there isn't that balance.
Anyway, I think we have had a nice little conversation between the two of us. It goes to show the three of us. Sorry, it goes to show that we don't have no moles, and that we are all thinking, and that we are willing to think, and that we're willing to allow people see us even have different positions. I'm happy that we have been able, with all of the politics, that we have been able still to have the kind of public eye that we show that we normally have, which one is that is really fruitful in terms of exploring points and
intellectual discussions. So it's interesting.
But if I have 1 second, I just want to talk a little bit about the thing about corruption again, just to really get it at home. The fact is that the PPM has decided, through their political advisors, who are not from the Cayman Islands, I can assure you of that they should stick to one point, because everybody who analyze politics know that if you stick to one point, you drive it into the minds of the people, you say the same thing over and over and over and over again, somebody will believe it, and perhaps more people than you would have thought. So they're not going to talk about things the way we have talked about things. They're going to be talking about corruption. They're going to be talking about our characters, and we would like you to be encouraged to see the full issues. Think about the candidates that we're offering you in the District of Georgetown. Think about Lloyd Sampson. Think about his intellect. Think about the fact that he's an independent thinker. He thinks well, he's young, and he's willing to be committed to the development of these islands. And I'd like you also to think about Beulah, who's my sister, and we have had a lot of interested people saying, oh, well, why you run your sister? I said, the reason why she's running, and I'm encouraging her to run because I think that she has something to offer that I don't have. But we don't want you to vote for her because she has something that Lloyd doesn't have. Or you vote for Lloyd and don't vote for me because he has something that I don't have, or vote for me because I have something that Lloyd doesn't have. We want you to vote for the entire ticket.
4.
We want you to vote for number 2,
3, 4, and 8.
Actually, I'm 4. Lloyd's 8, Beulah is 3, and John Henry Ebanks, who's not here, but I'm quite sure that he's tuned in, and he wasn't here because this incredible virus has been going around.
And John, we just hope you feel better soon.
John, we hope you feel better.
Yes,
and
we missed you tonight.
We missed you tonight. We know you would have been an incredible part of our conversation. Well, since we are going to be wrapping up in 4 minutes, Beulah, anything special you want to say after having been here all 2 hours?
Yeah, that's true. I guess I just want to say that it really is a pleasure to be able to go, come into the homes of all of the people that Cayman Island. It's a privilege to be running as a candidate in Georgetown, and it will be my privilege to serve you when elected on May the 11th, along with my running mates. And
could announce a meeting in Windsor Park too.
We will certainly do our best to continue good governance, open government, accountable government, and we will not be here to develop any scare tactics. We're not here to tell you about how terrible the world is. We're here to tell you about the solutions that we have to change the things of the world that impact you negatively.
I think I'd end off with just, I guess, where we started, encouraging all the proponents, all the players in this political campaign, no matter what role you play, to act responsibly and encourage the viewers and the electors to stay tuned to all the platforms, listen to the discussions. I'm happy that we were able to have this one tonight because I think it allowed you a better insight into us as candidates than does the political platform that you're accustomed, I suppose, to seeing us on. But stay tuned. We're, I think, in Windsor Park next. On the Tuesday the 19th, we're in Windsor Park having a meeting there in the community. We'd like people to come around and hear us. And we haven't been boasting too many of our accomplishments tonight. We've been trying to deal with some other issues. But if you watch the program tonight, it will be repeating on Sunday, this Sunday at 9 o'clock. So tell your friend, watch it. Watch it.
Straight from the heart.
It's straight from the heart, so they can call up and watch it. And I guess I know that the Honorable McKeeva Bush was doing something important tonight, and I just want to reassure you that I am not running for leader of the country. I am running to be a minister under the Honorable McKeeva Bush. I think that we have come to a situation where we need to choose a leader, and I do believe that he is a better leader than where is it now? Than Mr. Kirk Tibbetts. But I had a little cartoon. Have you seen my cartoon? Which one should I use? This is a nice little cartoon, and I just like you to go home. Where should I put that? Here. What?
Right there.
Here?
Right there.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that Mr. Bush is a much better leader. Good night from Public Eye, and God bless you.
Public Eye has been brought to you by the New Vision Movement.
For reservations, call your local travel agent or Cayman Airways 949-2311.
Food fair, it's a treat. No low pricing each and every week. Bargains galore at all 3 stores. At Foster's Food Fair, your dollar buys more. No low prices, that's what we are. Friendly faces, that's who we are. When you walk in our doors, you will see at Foster's Food Fair we care for you.
Okay. Any other business?
As a matter of fact, yes. My son is doing so well in school, I had to prepare a presentation to share with you. He's alert in class, full of energy at playtime, and he's still strong even after school. What's the secret? I give him Milo with Actigen E. It helps your children release all-day energy from the food they eat, so they'll be just like my boy. Any questions? Milo, now fortified with Actigen E. That's my boy.
This is the day that the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad.
Watch Gospel Insight Saturdays and Sundays at 6 a.m. on Cayman 27.
The Royal Bank of Canada and Cayman 27 are pleased to bring you the 2005 essay competition and a chance to win one of 3 college passport saving accounts worth 500 CI. Deadline for the essay is April 30th, and awards will be given out live on Daybreak, Monday the 16th of May. Further details are available at all schools. Take advantage of technology and benefit from the latest banking convenience with Royal Online. Royal Bank of Canada, supporting our local community and making your day easier with Royal Online.
In the heart of Grand Cayman, broadcasting from the Television Center, this is Cayman 27.